welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. Now, this particular field that we're in is going to be soybeans this year, and one of the concerns many soybean producers have across the country is sudden death syndrome. We'll talk about how to manage sudden death syndrome if that's a concern for you.
We're also going to discuss nitrogen stabilizers on the show today. This is a big issue around the country, talking about nitrogen, nitrates, and just overall costs on the farm. We want to do everything we can to conserve money on the farm, so we'll talk about when nitrogen stabilizers pay and when they don't.
Our weed of the week is a tough one. We'll show you how to stop it with your first pass this spring, but first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
Well, we're outside on a windy day, and you know what gives nice protection from the wind? A great shelter belt. So today we're going to talk a little bit about shelter belt management and just what we're doing in our own operation this spring.
It's always interesting in our part of the country when a shelter belt goes out, because all the neighbors are asking the question, well, are you putting some more trees in, or are you just getting rid of some that weren't in good shape? You know, for us, we actually did take a shelter belt out here a year ago, and we were putting up a new building, and we're going to put a shelter belt on the other side of the building. And as we're putting in a new shelter belt, it's great because now we get to think about all those things, including fertility. How do we want to set things up as far as which tree should go where, what different kinds of trees? So lots of decisions to put together a new shelter belt.
All right, so I've got all these papers in front of me because
you wanted them to blow around in the wind and make noise today.
Exactly. With the shelter belt, though, it'll be much better. But anyway, I guess just to go through some details with you so you kind of know what we're doing in our own operation. Not that you have to do this exact same plan on your farm. We farm in South Dakota.
It's going to vary depending on where you're at. Yeah,
That's
the
right.
trees are totally different if you're in a different climate. And as you come further north, there's a few things that we're thinking about. For one, we have a relatively short growing season, and we want the shelter belt to get up so it can provide some protection quickly. So in a lot of cases, what farmers will do in our area is put some sort of fast growing bush in that shelter belt. That way we get some shelter for the trees that take a little longer to grow.
Yeah, but almost any shelter belt, that's kind of what you do, is you have something that grows fast, something growing a little slower. Let me just run through our plan. On the outside rows, we're going to have alternating lilacs, common lilac and late lilac, planted 8 feet apart. Then the next row will be amber maple, 8 feet apart, then hackberries, 30 feet apart, native plums, 12 feet apart, and Colorado spruce, finally on the inside, 30 feet apart. Now, one of the big things that when we were talking to our dad, he said a lot of these people set their tree belts up too close together. The trees are too close, within the row, and then the rows are too close together. So a lot of people would have things much closer together with the trees. We're not doing that. We're also having the rows further apart. A lot of times you talk 12 or 15 feet in between. We're going to have 20 foot on center in terms of our row spacing.
You hate to tie up too much land, but by the same token, you have to think about those trees 20 years, 30 years down the road. How big will those trees actually get? And you want to leave space for those trees to give their full growth expression as they mature. Once you get trees that start bumping into each other, touching each other, that's not good for the health of your growth.
Okay, so we're putting in about 1,000 feet of shelter belt, roughly about 400 trees. We're also going to put fabric right in the tree line, and then we're going to put these tubes around the hackberries and the plum trees. And the reason why is just to protect from things like rabbits, deer. We want to do everything we can so these trees actually live long term, and we have great shelter belts, like Darren said, 20 or 30 years down the road. Now, both Darren and me, when we were growing up on the farm, we had to maintain shelter belts or help maintain shelter belts. This is a big deal for us because now when we're older, we see these shelter belts and we say, yeah, we worked on those when we were kids and now they're fantastic and everything's great. But it takes a lot of management all the way along. And one of the big things for us was watering those trees, and especially in dry years like 2012, a lot of people's trees died over the next couple of years because during the summer of 2012, they were so dry. You got to keep watering those trees, especially when they're small.
The other thing is fertility. And this is one of the things we didn't really understand when we were young kids out trying to just basically keep the weeds out of the trees. Now, as adults, we're looking at, all right, well, how should we set the soil up for optimum tree growth and tree health? When we think about nutrients like potassium, for example, we talk a lot about shooting for a minimum of a base saturation of 4% K when we're trying to raise corn and soybeans and wheat on our farm. However, for trees and things like vineyards, when you've got woody type plants, if you think about it, potassium is so critical for the stalks on our corn, it's very critical for the trunk on a tree. So we want to see that base saturation potassium up towards 7.5%, so considerably higher to get optimum tree growth.
So anyway, we suggest soil testing where you're going to put these trees in and do a really good job with fertility. In terms of weed control, you got to control the weeds too. We start out with Princip, Casseron. You could even use Prowl in trees where it's labeled. So there are a lot of different tree products. Just do a good job controlling the weeds, start with good fertility, water the trees, and give them plenty of space if you're putting in a new shelter belt.
Well, shelter belts are sure nice, but our weed of the week is not. We'll show you how to stop this weed coming up later in the show.
What's next in weed control technology? Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans will provide tolerance to dicamba and glyphosate and will be built on the Genuity Roundup Ready to Yield trait. See them in action at extendfollowafield.com.
Dirty work pays. That is if your dirty work includes a Soil Max Gold Digger tile plow. Soil Max tile plows feature zero deflection technology. With the only tile plow factory paired with Ag Leader's IntelliSlope control system, you eliminate the need for grade calculations and lasers. So make your next investment in a Soil Max Gold Digger. Better yield, longer planting and harvest windows, better water management is all yours with Soil Max. Visit soilmax.com.
Welcome to the 30-second tour of your local Poet plant. Local producers sell us tons of their grain. We grind it, mix it with water and special enzymes. The result is fermented, distilled, and dehydrated until it's 200 proof alcohol. Corn oil is extracted, and protein and nutrients are condensed, dried, and turned into animal feed, bringing our tour to an end with high-protein feed and cleaner-burning high-octane fuel. Visit poet.com to learn more.
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave pea. Most of your applied pea gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more pea available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing pea availability can lead to increased pea uptake in the plant. That's more pea, and more pea. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your pea with Avail.
I wish I could apply all the PK and micronutrients this crop needs at planting.
You can. When your soils are not excessively nutrient deficient, you can apply a whole season of PK and micronutrients when you plant and get top yields at harvest. AgroLiquid's exceptional nutrient compatibility and superior efficiency allows you to prescription apply everything your crop needs safely and conveniently. Research proves it. For more info, go to agroliquid.com.
A proven herbicide for decades, dicamba can provide burn-down residual control of tough and resistant weeds for up to 14 days. That's another reason why farmers will use dicamba for years to come. Brought to you by Roundup Ready Plus Weed Management Solutions.
Darren and I get a lot of questions about nitrogen stabilizers. You know, here's the thing. Let me just first give you my quick summary on nitrogen stabilizers. We're really big believers in these products because even if you look at all the factors, and we'll talk about those in just a second here, but even if you look at all the factors of, hey, I can save money and I can get more efficient nitrogen usage, all that's nice. But one of the things that we look at, and I don't think gets talked about enough, is the environmental thing. So, for example, this spring you may have heard about in Des Moines, they're having this big issue with nitrate in the water and they're concerned that farmers are polluting the water. Well, farmers really aren't polluting the water. I mean, what we're finding is the levels are actually not too bad in the water, but nevertheless, as farmers, we don't want to lose any of our nitrogen. We want to keep it in the field. And so what nitrogen stabilizers do for the most part is help keep nitrogen in the ammonium form, and ammonium is positively charged, locks onto soil well, doesn't leach like nitrate does. So if we can do that, it's a great thing for the environment.
I want to go back to one of your first comments, Brian, and that was, we're big believers in nitrogen stabilizers. Here's why. We've seen the research, and we've done the research on our farm. We want to see these things on our farm, try them out, and see for ourselves. Take the data out, see what kind of yield differences we have, look at how much nitrate is going down through our soil. Are we losing some nitrogen when we're not using these products? How much are they protecting us? And what we've seen is that we're able to hold more nitrogen in our fields, and that's going to result in higher yields and a lower fertility bill for us. We don't have to put on extra nitrogen to account for any that we may have lost.
Now, as soon as Darren says we can hold more nitrogen, I don't want you thinking that, hey, I've got a 4 CEC that can only hold about 40 pounds of nitrogen. I can just go ahead and put 200 pounds on with a nitrogen stabilizer and I should be good. No, no, no. Okay, these products are nice tools. They're going to help you some, but it's not magically going to turn your soil into this enormous nitrogen holding capacity machine, okay? So if I had a 4 CEC, I'd still split apply. I would still put a little on early and a little more later and a little more after that, all right? But using the nitrogen stabilizers at least helps keep that nitrogen in the ammonium form. You get a better chance to reduce the amount of leaching. Now, in really heavy soils, we have another problem. It's called denitrification, where it holds so much that it actually holds too much water in a lot of cases. So if we have poor drained, really heavy soils, then we get this denitrification issue. Well, here again, if we can keep that nitrogen in the ammonium form longer, then it's just a better chance for us to have that nitrogen used by our crop instead of going up in the air.
You know, with nitrogen stabilizers, they're grouped into one category. Hey, these are nitrogen stabilizers, but there are actually different products in there with completely different methods of helping protect your nitrogen. For example, you use a product like Nutrisphere N, you're using polymers, where when you're using a product like Agritane, for example, you may be using a product that's going to control bacteria in the soil that are going to convert that nitrogen. So there's different ways of these products working, and we're going to see more products coming out in the next few years as well that may even have other methods. That's fine. I don't mind that there's different ways they're going to work. I look at it much the same way as controlling weeds in our fields. Well, we don't use the same mode of action every year. Maybe rotating is a good thing. That's something that I've yet to see any studies on, but it seems to make common sense that you'd use some different methods over time to spread out your risks a little bit.
One of the most important things you need to do, though, is know what your stabilizer will do. Some, for example, only protect against volatilization loss. Okay, so that's not going to do you any good for leaching or denitrification. We have some products like N-Serve, for example, that only works on anhydrous, and then others will work on liquid fertilizer. We also have some products available in the market today that are good for manure, putting it with your manure. And a lot of people think of manure as a waste product. Well, it's a tremendous fertilizer, so we want to keep that in the field rather than going up in the air or down into our water. Well, once again, we are big believers in nitrogen stabilizers. They're not going to pay for you in all cases, but in a lot of situations they do pay. But again, I come back to, for the environment, we as farmers have to do everything we can to protect the environment from any nitrate loss, and that's where the nitrogen stabilizers can pay big benefits that don't necessarily show up in your checkbook.
Well, one big benefit that you can have is controlling our weed of the week. So if you let this thing go, it's going to destroy your next crop. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed coming up later in the show.
The math for getting higher yield potentials is simple. 4 is greater than 2. Steiger Rotrax Series tractors give you proven Case IH Quadtrac technology, helping you cover more acres in less time. And with 4 independent oscillating tracks, you'll also minimize ground pressure and compaction for a better growing environment, all of which adds up to higher potential yields. The world of farming is changing. Be ready with Case IH.
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving and rocks and has contour conformity equaling 0 downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
Dirty work pays. That is if your dirty work includes a Soil Max Gold Digger tile plow. Soil Max tile plows feature zero deflection technology. With the only tile plow factory paired with Ag Leader's IntelliSlope control system, you eliminate the need for grade calculations and lasers. So make your next investment in a Soil Max Gold Digger. Better yield, longer planting and harvest windows, better water management is all yours with Soil Max. Visit soilmax.com.
Being a farmer means securing your land and livelihood for the future. Harvest Solutions from Capello USA have the grit to get you there. Our product lines for corn, sunflowers, and forage are designed for efficiency and longevity, preventing harvest loss while minimizing maintenance and downtime. To do everything you can to advance your farmland to the next generation, call us at 855-CAPELLO or visit us at capellousa.com. Capello USA, Italian craftsmanship, American grit.
I've been involved in developing new technologies in agriculture for over 3 decades. The changing times demanded that we develop new and better equipment. Dry powder applications on seed can only be highly successful if they can be easily, effectively, and accurately applied to the target. That's where our company, Changing Times and CT Applicators, come into the picture. The innovative CT Applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, soybean inoculants, or other dry products. Remember, CT Applicators for the changing times.
Over the last few years, sudden death syndrome has continued to get worse in a lot of areas of the country. So today we'll talk about how you stop this tough disease.
All right, first of all, whenever we think of a problem in our crops with biotech, we're thinking, well, wait a second, somebody's probably already found a solution. Maybe there's some resistant varieties out there. Unfortunately, for sudden death syndrome in soybeans, there aren't any resistant varieties, but there are varieties that have more tolerance. So variety selection is going to be one of the factors that we'll discuss today.
Before you go any further, I just want to bring this up real quick because you start talking about biotech and then resistance here. There are some people that think all the Liberty Link varieties are so much better than the Roundup Ready varieties. Does that have anything to do with the trait?
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with the trait. That is an observation that was made, especially in the areas growing Group 3 soybeans this last year. We did seem to notice there were more of the Liberty Link varieties that had higher levels of tolerance. That's not to say that if you pick the right Roundup Ready varieties that you won't have good tolerance as well. Just one of those things. When you're crossing that trait in, not only are you crossing the trait into different varieties, you're crossing that germplasm in the variety that has the trait. And the parent variety for the Liberty Link beans in the Group 3s had pretty good sudden death syndrome tolerance, a little more than what the parent variety for the Roundup Ready to Yield soybeans did. And so naturally, you've got more varieties that are going to have that in there. But as you start doing more crossing with the Roundup Ready varieties and the Liberty Link varieties, you can cross other germplasm in, and suddenly, any inherent weaknesses of that parent variety seem to go away over time.
The other big misconception that's out there is planting later is going to help you so dramatically that everybody should delay planting on their soybeans until really late and will solve the sudden death syndrome and still have high yields. Well, from the research that we've seen so far, that's absolutely not true. If you delay planting, you've lost a bunch of yield. Just like if you get sudden death syndrome, you've lost yield. So our suggestion is plant your best sudden death syndrome varieties early, but don't delay planting, and then just continue planting just like you normally would, planting the most susceptible varieties last. Because let's face it, we don't even know if we're going to have sudden death this year in soybeans. We might not. But the one thing I'm really excited about is the new seed treatments that are out there. Elevo from Bayer and Murtec from Syngenta are the products we'd suggest trying on your farm. We've seen pretty good data so far out of the Elevo. Haven't really seen much data out of the Murtec, but at least we've got a couple options going forward. The other thing is foliar. We talk all the time about, we want to use a foliar fungicide in soybeans, okay? It's been paying, but we don't see a lot of impact on sudden death. Well, now we're seeing some data where Fortix fungicide, when sprayed early, like right when the soybeans start to flower, at that early stage, it is showing basically the sudden death doesn't come until a little bit later in the year after you've sprayed that fungicide, so that translates to yield gain.
It's certainly something to take a look at on your farm. Now, you may say, well, hold on. I've been using my fungicide at R2 or R3, full bloom to first pod, and I've had pretty good gains with that. That's fine. We'll still see a pretty decent gain at an R1 application, especially in the face of SDS. If you can stop SDS, you know you're going to gain some yield. But, when we look at it, we still have time to come back with another application if we want. For example, with white mold, our best solution has been to spray at R1, first bloom, and at R3. So depending on what disease situation you have in your field, you may consider a 2-application approach. However, if sudden death syndrome is your only thing, that first application would be the one to give the most benefit.
Well, once again, with sudden death syndrome, we just strongly encourage you, pick good varieties, use one of these new seed treatments, and then maybe try some Fortix at first flower.
Hey, one other thing too, Brian, I should point out is soil conditions are so critical. If you've got compaction problems or a drainage issue in your field, get those things fixed. Once you do that, that takes away a lot of the chance of fusarium getting into your plant to begin with. So again, watch your fields this spring. If you've got poor drainage in certain areas, improve it right away. It'll definitely pay you in terms of yield, but also reduce disease. And then compaction, reducing your compaction in the field always pays as well.
Controlling sudden death syndrome is important if you want top yields, but so is stopping our Weed of the Week. It's coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our weed of the week is volunteer alfalfa. Now hold on, if you're an alfalfa producer, we're not trying to kill your alfalfa. We know that's a crop. But the thing is, if you're going from the crop alfalfa, now you're trying to raise another crop. If you have volunteer plants, that could be the worst weed problem on your farm this year.
All right, first of all, we've added some complication to this with Roundup Ready alfalfa.
Yes.
Now, our best option, my favorite option, using Roundup to kill the alfalfa, is taken off the table.
Yep.
So we've got a limited amount of herbicide options, and then we also think about tillage as well. Many guys over the years, Brian, and I'll question you on this, have used either tillage or high rates of 2,4-D. What do you think of those options?
Well, I really don't like either one of them. Now, the problem with any perennial weed that you have is when you do tillage, you don't completely eliminate that root. So the root can still put up new shoots later, and many times we just spread that weed rather than actually controlling it. So with the perennial weeds with big roots, that's where the herbicides really pay over tillage. As far as 2,4-D, it's great burning stuff to the ground. It's just, it doesn't do the very best job killing roots and all. So that's where we get concerned. Hey, the other thing, when you mention this Roundup Ready alfalfa, I get really worried because in soybeans, until we had Roundup as an option to kill the alfalfa, there was nothing. So I get calls from farmers all the time. They say, yeah, I got some volunteer alfalfa in my soybeans. What do I do? And I said, either cultivate or plow it up, or you have to live with it. So once we go back to this, hey, we don't have any options other than Liberty, if you want to plant Liberty soybeans.
Well, the problem with Liberty is it doesn't have root activity either. It doesn't have the root activity like Roundup.
Right?
It's good at top growth
at least
control.
You burn it down.
Yeah, at least you can keep it from competing against your crop. The other question we get, Brian, is what about, do I take my first cutting in the spring and then kill the alfalfa, or should I kill it first?
Well, it all depends on if you have water or not. So in a wet area, I don't have any problem if you want to take the first cutting.
Or
But
if
in
you
a
have irrigation.
Yep, but in a dry area, that typically doesn't work in a normal rainfall year. So we want to get that under control actually in the fall. I know we're talking about this in the spring, but really we like controlling all the alfalfa in the fall, and then we start clean in the spring and we don't have something pulling up our water and nutrients. But yeah, the earlier you can get out there, the better in the spring.
But you do need some regrowth. So you'd really ideally like to see maybe 4 inches of regrowth or a little bit more. That way you know you have enough green material up there to take your herbicide in to get a good kill.
Okay, so if it's not Roundup Ready alfalfa, just make sure you're using the maximum label rate of Roundup, because again, this is a tough weed and we want to kill it completely, not just kill it partially.
When you say that, use the full rate of Roundup. I agree with that recommendation, but we hear from farmers all the time, well, I just used 32 ounces of a 6-pound Roundup, so I did a good job with that. I know I could have gone up to 44 or something like that, but 32 seemed to be enough. But what we find in many cases is those guys a month or so later are saying, oh no, I've got some new shoots coming up. I guess I must not have had enough to get all the way through that root system. And if you want to stop alfalfa from really hurting your yields, you've got to wipe it out that first time, because now you've got weeds coming up in crop later in the season. That's tougher to control. And also, as Brian was mentioning, with the taking up of moisture, now it's that much longer time that crop is taking up the moisture out of your soil, and it's just going to hurt your yield that much more.
The other thing is Roundup is cheap, so throw just a little bit more out there for another $1 or $2. It doesn't cost much. Now, if you go to corn, you know, dicamba for years has been pretty good. A lot of people use the other products, the HPPDs, Stinger, things like that. That gets a little bit more questionable. My favorite is Status, but if not, Banville or Clarity would be my choice in corn.
Well, that's all time for this week's weed, volunteer alfalfa, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
In today's Iron Talk, we'll discuss how to protect your spray booms and equipment from, well, the products that you're spraying. It's no secret that almost any fertilizer can be corrosive, and when you're spraying liquid fertilizers like 1034O and 28% nitrogen, you need to be proactive if you'd like to avoid the expense of replacing your equipment every few years. Today we'll talk about where to begin with the way your equipment is painted. Then we'll discuss how to keep your boom in tip-top shape even when you're spraying every day. Start with a clean, painted spray boom. If you're purchasing a new spray boom, look for booms with a powder coat paint. Powder coat paint is about 10 times more durable than spray-on paints and is resistant to most chemicals. In fact, you can even dent equipment without chipping powder coat paint. If you already own a spray-on painted boom, look it over closely for bare metal and paint it a couple of days before you start spraying for protection. Wax and polish your equipment at the start of the season for even more protection. I realize that sounds a little excessive, but this is just the kind of farm that Brian and I grew up on, where our dad had us wax and polish things, and it really made a difference on that spray boom. Having a well-polished machine allows you more time to get things cleaned up again before the product sets in or begins to corrode your machine. We power wash our spray boom every night when we're applying fertilizer and herbicides because most of those materials are so sticky that if you don't get after it right away, it's tough to clean them up later. So be proactive to prolong your equipment life. That's it for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots from Monsanto Bioegg is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more, and is applied to the seed so the live microorganisms go right to work enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Get Quick Roots today.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
Precision in grain moisture management can save you thousands in spoilage and elevator docks. The AgriDry Bullseye Controller monitors temperature and grain moisture and is available for all dryer makes and models. Plus, our AD-Link feature gives you 24/7 remote monitoring and allows you to control your dryer wherever you are. Call us today for more information.
Dry Load Store, 1-855-AgriDry.
I wish I could side dress more than just nitrogen.
You can. While side dressing is efficient for nitrogen applications, you can also use that opportunity to apply PK and the micronutrients your crop needs. AgroLiquid's Calibrate and MicroLink products allow you to nutritionally balance your side dress application efficiently and economically. Let agriculture liquid fertilizer help you make your next crop a bumper crop. For more info, visit agroliquid.com.
Some prefer to invest in fields halfway around the world, in short-term solutions to long-term challenges. At Poet, we're investing in the fields we have right here at home, cultivating communities and growing the local economy, creating new local jobs while we create worldwide energy solutions, helping family farms grow even as they fuel the world. Because we know that investing in a community can pay global dividends. See the world differently with Poet.
Your time is valuable. That's why you need a Hagie STS application system. Hagie STS products are designed for precision and efficiency, allowing you to make applications all season long with just one machine. Contact your Hagie rep today.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show, but this week we encourage you to tune in to Ag PhD Radio. That's on Sirius XM Channel 80 at 2 p.m. Central each weekday.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD television program, or we'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
No one cares more for the environment than family farmers who plan to pass their land down to their children. These same farmers are working to double yields over the next 15 to 20 years to feed the growing world. To learn how they plan to do it, visit rnmf.org.